Hi there guys, got the final video here today on the FX M4 Micro, and in this one I want to go over what it's been like to own for the last 5 months and then show off some modifications that I've made to the rifle. Now before we get into that, I want to say that this rifle here was purchased using my own money from the brilliant Crawley surplus store. Now I buy all my rifles through them as they are easily one of the best RFDs in the country and they deserve support for the service that they give. The very last thing I'll mention before we get started is that if you are in the market for a new rifle, you can use the code SUB12 Airgunners at the Crawley Surplus store to get 7% off any purchase in store or online. Right then, so is the FX M4 a good rifle? So my answer to that is yes. The FX Impact is one of those rifles that you have to shoot in order to appreciate. It is super slick to operate and is easily one of the best looking rifles on the market today. This particular rifle here is the Sabre Tactical Micro Edition, which comes with a shorter barrel and a few of the Sabre Tactical goodies installed from the factory, but even the standard long barrel rifle is a fantastic looking bit of kit. Overall, the M4 has successfully built on the M3 platform, and whilst there's not a massive jump between the rifles, I would say that the trigger on the M4 is a fantastic improvement over the older M3, and it does fix one of the big weak points of the older rifles. Apart from that, like most FX rifles, the overall fit and finish of everything is absolutely top notch, and the Sabre Tactical parts match that quality nicely. As you can see here, we have the extended bottom rail with both Arca and M-LOK support. On the top we have the TRS rail with the stiffened backbone, and then finally at the back here we have the butt pad and bag rider combo. All of the parts look great and they do provide a good amount of utility over the original parts. Right then, moving on from the looks of the rifle, how did it actually perform? Now I'll be honest with you, this particular rifle wasn't the most accurate thing out the box. It was still plenty good enough for doing something like hunting or general target shooting. However, doing groups on paper or something like bench rest, it wasn't amazing. Out of the box, it was doing roughly an inch group at 50 yards, which again, for a short compact rifle isn't bad, but it is something that I wanted to mention. Everything else on the rifle worked flawlessly. The feet per second spread over a magazine was fairly good. The regulator seems to have no or little to no creep on it. And even the new 34-shot magazine seems to be a slight improvement on the older one. Right then, with that all out of the way, the next thing we'll do is just run through some modifications that I've made to this particular rifle. So the first one, and probably the most important one, is replacing the STX liner with a solid barrel. This was done just to improve the overall accuracy of the rifle, and I will say again that the factory one wasn't terrible. However, it did have a small amount of POI shift, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not a massive fan of the liner system, so it just got swapped out for a proper barrel. I did a video comparing the two back to back, which I'll link just somewhere up there. But in short, putting the solid barrel on the rifle did improve the accuracy, and it did get rid of the point of impact shift. Right then, after the barrel was done, I then turned my attention to the moderator. Now the standard rifle comes with the Donny FL coil, which does the job nicely. However, I wanted something a little bit longer and with 1/2" UNF support on the end. So what I ended up doing is making a new core for the moderator with a 1/2" UNF on the end cap, and I did keep the original outer tube as the core itself is a good looking moderator, and I wanted to keep the Donny FL laser engraving on the end there. Now the moderator itself is quiet enough as the barrel finishes just about here, so on the end it didn't really make sense to add another moderator, so what I ended up doing is just making a muzzle brake for the end. This is one of my standard designs with the removable end cap, and if you're interested in seeing how I made both the shroud core and the muzzle brake, I do have a video on the channel, which again I'll link up the top there. Right then, moving on from that, the other thing I did was install the 750 big plenum. So the bigger plenum provides very few benefits on the sub 12 pound rifles. However, it does look much better than the original skinny one the standard rifle comes with. I will say I did end up plugging the plenum volume, so it's actually just a little smaller than the standard one, and that was done just to limit the power of the rifle. Now, I did do a fitting video on the plenum on the channel, so I'll leave a link to that up there somewhere. It's not a bad job, but it does require a full disassembly of the rifle, and when you get it on there, you may have to adjust the reg pressure in order to get it shooting where you want it. Apart from that, the rifle's been fully stripped down and then rebuilt with new O-rings and new grease, and I also went through and made a couple of small components like a longer and lighter hammer, a few spring guides, and one or two other things just to make the action a little bit snappier. Then apart from that, it's just got some bolt-on upgrades like the quick tune system and lock, a new trigger blade, it's got the adjustable valve on the end there, and then on the side there it's got an angled gauge bracket just so I can read the gauge when I'm sitting behind the rifle. But with that all said and done, the next thing we'll do is I'll take the rifle downrange and I'll show you how well it shoots. Right then, as always, here we are all set up in Pete's Airgun Farm at the 50-yard range. I have a target set out at 50 yards and I'm just doing some 5-shot groups using the JSB shorts, and they are die 19 for anyone interested. No scope cam footage today, I have another one ordered, so that should be here shortly. But one thing I did want to ask you guys is how much shooting footage do you actually want to see? For me, the shooting footage is quite boring, so I like to keep it short, but let me know in the comments if you want to see more. Right then, so that's the groups at 50 yards. I'm really quite happy with the way the rifle's shooting. It's really nice and easy just to sit behind the rifle, fire off a few mags down range and get a decent enough group. The next thing we'll do is move the target a little closer to 30 yards and I'll show you some groups at 30. Now, to be honest with you, I don't really shoot much at the closer ranges unless I'm doing something like a bench rest card, so I don't really show it on camera, but I do know some of you don't have a 50-yard range available to you, so the closer range footage is more relatable. And to be honest with you, 30 yards is a much more reasonable distance to get decent groups. At 50 yards, even very small things can make a massive difference, especially with sub-12 rifles. But I like shooting at 50 yards, so that's typically what I show. Right then, last thing I'll do is just show you some chronograph footage. So the rifle has bedded in a little now and is quite consistent. Over our magazine, the feet per second spread typically sits at around 6 to 10 using unweighed, unsalted pellets straight through a magazine. That for me is more than acceptable. I'm not really going to faff around with weighing or sorting pellets, and anything under 10 is perfectly acceptable to me personally. I will say it was slightly more consistent with the plenum plug out, but I did want to run the regulator a little higher, and I'm much more concerned about accuracy than overall feet per second spread. At the moment, the regulator is set at around 70 bar, and I did experiment with the regulator at different pressures, but I found 70 bar to be a good pressure for both accuracy and shot count. I did try a few different pellet speeds as well. Around 780 feet per second using JSB 8.44 grain pellets worked quite well, as did around 750 feet per second. That is something I am noticing with a few other rifles as well. There does seem to be two different sweet spots for the pellet speeds. Typically you wouldn't really test anything below 760 feet per second, as most of the time you want the rifle shooting above 11 foot-pounds. However, around 740 to 750 feet per second seems to be quite accurate even at 50 yards. But with that said, that's enough looking at a chronograph, so the next thing we'll do is go back over to the bench and I'll give you my final thoughts. Right then, with that all said and done, is the FX M4 worth buying? To that I say yes. I am a massive fan of the FX rifles, and this particular one is number 14, and in the new year I will be getting a Leopard as well, so that's number 15. This was not the most accurate rifle in the world straight out the box, but it was certainly one of the nicest to shoot. Unless you're looking to do something that requires pinpoint accuracy like bench rest or something similar, the FX M4 will pretty much do anything you want it to. with that said and done, that's pretty much going to do it for this particular video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been interesting or useful, and I'll see you in the next one.